Welcome back. The Gauteng Department of Education has announced that subsidies for more than 600 Quintile 5 schools across the province will be reduced from 879 to 315 per learner for the 2026 schooling calendar. Now, the department has cited national budget constraints. Meanwhile, collective of civil society groups and school governing bodies have raised concerns about the drastic cut and the lasting impact it will have. Let's speak to the head of research at Equal Education, Mahfouz Raffee, about this situation. I mean, how did we get to a point where hundreds of Gauteng schools are losing most of their funding, and we're talking big cuts here, more than 60%?
Greetings to you and your viewers. Thanks for having me on, Veronica. I think that context is very important, that education funding in general has been burdened and constrained by austerity as a whole. And this cut of subsidies to Quintile 5 schools is just one of a number of numerous morbid symptoms in the system. We are very familiar with other services that have been cut, scholar transport in the Western Cape teachers and things like this. So the system as a whole is under severe constraint. And this is another case in point of how austerity is really affecting learners and affecting the public education system as a whole.
And I think there is a little bit of controversy as well about this. Apart from the budget cuts themselves, I understand that the Education Department is insisting that these cuts are affecting specifically Quintile 5 schools. Yet, lobby groups see this as a targeted attack. What is the truth essentially behind this?
Look, I mean, I think there are lots of problems with the school resourcing model as a whole. So the per learner subsidy that's allocated according to different quintiles is in theory very progressive, right? Because it gives more to no-fee schools and poorer schools than it does to fee-paying schools, which are in Quintile 4 and 5. But what we're seeing is because of demographic changes, there are a select number of these schools who fall under Quintile 5 that actually have very few fee-paying learners or serve learners in a predominantly poor community. So there's a real problem with the data that the department is collecting and the way it's able to update and manage its system so that it can provide better resources to poorer schools. Ultimately, though, I think as a whole and in general, Quintile 5 schools, while there are those exceptions, they do generally serve richer communities. And so the cut to their subsidies, while drastic and will definitely affect the school budgets, perhaps not as worrisome in terms of protecting the right to education as in other areas. We know in like KwaZulu-Natal, for example, the per learner subsidy for no-fee schools is far below what the prescribed threshold amount. So what Gauteng is doing here is sort of adjusting. They've been giving higher than the prescribed threshold amount to Quintile 5 schools, and is now adjusting that downwards to fall in line with the prescribed threshold. It will have a bad effect on education, and it likely there will be many poor learners who are affected this precisely because the resourcing model and the data that the education departments collect is not good. But it's one of an example of many unfair and unjust decisions that education departments have to make in the context of austerity, which is really putting the education system under immense pressure.
And when we speak about these Quintile 5 schools, many are saying that these are schools essentially that have, as you've mentioned, that are far better resourced. But behind these numbers are teachers, are cleaners, and of course are parents that are trying to keep these schools running. What are you hearing perhaps from the schooling communities about how this will play out in the classroom next year?
No, certainly it's a cause of concern, right? Of course, equal education is a vast majority of schools that we organize in are Quintile 1 to 3 schools. But we know from various sources and looking at the data that if you cut schools' subsidy by 500 Rand per learner and the school has about 1,000 learners, that's already 500,000 Rand less that the school will have for its budget. And certainly, these fee-paying schools in particular, I suppose, do employ extra staff. And now with a reduced overall budget, this is certainly going to put many positions under strain. But it's also important. So this subsidy is for things like routine maintenance, municipal bills, textbooks. It's very scary. What we hear sometimes, particularly because the rate of water and electricity has been increasing at a far higher rate than the subsidy has been increasing, right? And so what's happening is more and more schools are unable to pay their municipal bills and end up falling into arrears. This becomes very scary because at times we've heard stories of municipalities cutting off water and electricity to schools who are in arrears around exams at times. And this undermines the children's right to education. So without these subsidies, schools, not only their staff, but also their services and ultimately learners are going to be really under immense strain, as they already are, to provide for the right to education. Ultimately, I think it's incumbent on National Treasury to have a look, re-look at its fiscal strategy, reverse austerity measures that have been plaguing the sector for a number of years, but also for the Department of Basic Education and provincial education departments to better understand and target their resources to serve those most vulnerable.
And you speak about the financial reality that some of these schools have to face. While the department says, of course, this is all about financial sustainability. But if schools are going to be forced to hike fees to survive, as you've mentioned, water, electricity, ultimately it's parents that will have to dig deep into their pockets. We'd remember even just in the beginning of this academic year where we had parents complaining about some of the things on the stationery list. Is that what we should anticipate when it comes to the 2026 calendar?
Yes, I think this is a perennial problem. If we look at this specific subsidy, it's sort of accounts for a relatively small amount of spending of the education system at whole, which is all under strain. But as it's being cut, the costs are being pushed onto parents and onto households individually. So we see it at the beginning of every year. Some very, very scary things happen that undermine learners' rights. Parents are often, in a way, being extorted to pay in no-fee schools, so a non-voluntary, voluntary contribution. And there's increased fees in fee-paying schools. There's increased requests for donations, bringing paper reams. These all have a big impact on households who, by and large, are unable to afford subsidizing the education sector that should be public, right? But this is a growing concern, especially with the cuts of subsidies. And it just speaks to what austerity does, is that when the state retreats from its duties, then it passes the burdens onto vulnerable households, and in many cases, therefore neglects the rights of learners.
And of course, finally, we know that there are lobby groups as well as teacher unions that are exploring legal action. But what is the real solution? How do we protect the right to quality education without deepening inequality between public schools?
Yes, certainly. I think the equality consideration, it should be paramount, right? And so making sure that you do provide equitable funding comes from two demands. I think that which we speak to the source of the problem. And the first is the fiscal strategy of austerity that needs to be urgently reversed. Every rand that you spend less on education now, you're going to end up, it's going to give a cost on society later. So it's not something that we can afford to be not spending on now. But secondly, also, the departments should do better in collecting better data so that they can more accurately target vulnerable learners, and that even those Quintile 5 schools who do serve poor communities can be in some shape or form protected against real jeopardy caused by these cuts.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time in that conversation. It will be quite interesting to see as well when those matters do head to the court. And of course, that was the head of research at Equal Education, Mahfouz Raffee. Thanks for your time.